Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Afro Swing FX. Today we want to look at the NFP that was released on 2nd of August and the effect it had in the market. Particularly, I want us to focus on the Swiss franc. I think there's something happening in the works, so stay tuned and let's find out. Welcome back to Afro Swing FX. So today I want us to look at the Swiss franc. I'll go to my charts, but before I go to my charts, we had NFP that was released on 2nd of August. That was on Friday, 2 weeks ago. I think 2 weeks or so. And we had negative figures. We had very poor outcomes. We had downgrade of the previous results, and then the current results came. They were below expectation, an increase in unemployment rate. So ideally, we should see the dollar should be weakening across the board. But what was interesting is that we saw the reverse. I'm using an arrow to show NFP release across dollar related pairs. So we have Bitcoin versus the dollar. NFP was released on 2nd of August around this time, but we saw the dollar increasing in strength. That is BTC USD. And then we have Ethereum USD. Same thing happened. There was a decline in cross dollar pairs, meaning the dollar was strengthening. I mean, ideally, when you see weaker NFP data, you should see the dollar weakening, but you're seeing the dollar strengthening. And that should give you an idea where the institutions are actually, what institutions are planning for the dollar. NFP was released somewhere around here. We see gold fell in price to around 23.65. That is after NFP. We come back to silver, more or less the same thing. We go to gbpusd, more or less the same thing. AUD USD, same pattern. The values declined, and then now they're recovering much later. But there's a particular currency that I want us to focus on, that is the Swiss franc. So look at the NFP release. Let me just go to the daily. NFP release, Swiss franc pairs crashed. And their pattern is more or less the same, what we are seeing on the N side. More or less the same thing, because the NFP was released somewhere around here. NFP was released here, and there's a crash there. What about gbpchf? Same thing. Let us go to audchf. NFP release around that area. Price crashed down. What about audjpy? NFP release was somewhere around here. So price did the same thing, they crashed. So if we focus on cross Swiss franc pairs, we are seeing that they reacted more aggressively than the cross USD pairs did. And that tells me that financial institutions, chances are they are not loading up on shorts for the dollar. Actually, they could be neutral, or they could be adding on to their long positions for the dollar, because you should see the dollar crashing. So where do I see the Swiss franc moving forward? I'll go to the Swiss franc index and I'll go to the monthly time frame. I'll start with the daily time frame. Sorry, this is the NFP release, and the Swiss franc spiked. The index spiked. It went upwards. So now where do we expect it to go? So if I look at the monthly chart on the Swiss franc, we have an unmitigated zone seated up there, and we have a fair value gap that is yet to be fully mitigated. So there's a very strong possibility that we are likely to see the Swiss franc increase in value in the coming weeks. And that means every cross Swiss franc pair is likely to decrease in value. So on the monthly chart, I expect the Swiss franc to increase in value. Let us see now the actual pairs. I'll start with GBP CHF. I'll move my notes. So what am I seeing on the weekly? There's a possibility, because I said we see the Swiss franc index increasing in value, we're also likely to see now cross Swiss franc pairs decreasing in value. So we are likely to see GBP CHF now break and form maybe a new low, And thereafter, we are likely to see now the recovery towards the region of 1.16 or 1.14. That is more or less the same thing what I expect to see, because we are in a very interesting support area here. We have the main support for the weekly structure, and we have another support for the current internal structure. They're sitting more or less in the same area. That tells me that they are likely to be broken very, very soon. And if they are broken, then we'll have now a recovery much later, possibly early September. So what I see is also a decline in AUDCHF. Generally, I see a decline across all Swiss franc pairs. Generally, I see a decline, except maybe CHF JPY. That's something I really don't want to touch, and I wouldn't recommend anyone touches it. If you look at Euro CHF, you also expect the same thing: a decline, a break of structure, then a recovery thereafter. USD CHF, I am not so sure about this one. The dollar is at play here. Remember, we said financial institutions are not shorting the dollar. So if they are not shorting the dollar, I cannot expect that the USD CHF will also form new lows. But if it forms new lows, we have new positions to trade. New Zealand Swiss franc, New Zealand dollar Swiss franc, we also expect new lows to be formed, and then a recovery thereafter. CAD CHF, because of oil, I also am neutral on this pair. I really can't tell you what will happen, but chances are we are going to see a strengthening of the Swiss franc this week. On the dollar end, I have my trades. I have a trade on GBP USD that I shorted, and after NFP, we did not see the GBP USD rise further. We actually saw a decline days after. I think we are in a bearish leg, and let me explain why I think we're in a bearish leg. If I go to the weekly charts, so I want to show you something here. Allow me just to draw. We have this impulsive move downwards. We have a minor correction, and then we have continuation of correction. That tells me I don't think there's a high probability GBP will rise even further. I think it will come crashing down in the coming weeks. The reason behind it, I don't know. These are just my thoughts based on technical analysis on supply and demand. So that's where I am on GBP USD. Chances are I think GBP will be weaker across the board moving to late August, early September. Remember, we are now getting into Q4, will be October, November, December. So we are in the middle of Q3, and I think that this is the time you'll see financial institutions begin to shift their positions, because they are targeting end of year to rebalance some of their books and some of their portfolio. So we could see a lot of currencies behaving weirdly. They're not behaving weirdly. It's simply financial institutions and asset managers moving currencies around to manage their portfolios. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, also take a look. I did a video on which way I think the yen is going to go. It's somewhere here. I will put it somewhere here. Take a look, like my videos, subscribe, and do share my work. Thank you.